All right, welcome back to Senate Ed. Beth, thanks so much for being with us again. Jim as well, great. We are looking at a draft bill that I have just to kind of put this out on the table that we might turn into a committee bill that we might just have some conversation about, but I thought Ms. St. James could bring us through it. This is basically asking the question of how can we get teachers to have their careers in Vermont? What are the kinds of things that we want to do, that we should be doing as we think about, as we've heard, particularly from Mr. Fannin, that the teacher shortage is already here, really, and it's just going to get worse as time goes on with retirements. And how can we as a state stay competitive? What are the things that we can do? You know, I would love to get to the point where this is the place to teach, that you want to be here. And of course,
they do.
There already some teachers do want to certainly be here, and this is the place to teach. But how can we make it even better and more attractive, and that going forward, this is particularly the state that people want to come and have their careers in. So with that, Ms. St. James, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Campion. Again, Beth St. James, Ledge Council for the record. And would you like me to share my screen?
Sure, please.
Okay. See if I can do that. You all see a Word document?
Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you. So this is a bill that proposes to create the Vermont Teaching Careers Study Committee to look at exactly what Chair Campion described in his lead up to this walkthrough. So this bill is creating in session law because it's a committee, so it's not something that would need to stand in law forever. The Teaching Careers Study Committee, and it would require them to write a report. So it would create the study committee to make recommendations on how to increase interest in teaching in Vermont elementary and secondary schools. The committee would be composed of the following 9 members or their designees. For each of the members and the positions that I'm about to list, there's also the or designee provision for each of them. So the first member would be the executive director of the Vermont Superintendents Association, followed by the executive director of the Vermont School Boards Association, executive director of the Vermont Council of Special Education Administrators, the executive director of the Vermont Principals Association, the executive director of the Vermont Independent Schools Association, the executive director of the Vermont National Education Association, the Secretary of Education, a representative appointed by the Vermont Standards Board for Professional Educators. And you'll notice there's no or designee there. It is essentially a designee from someone appointed from the Standards Board. And then the final member would be the commissioner of, and I believe that should be the Department of Mental Health or designee. The study committee shall recommend to the General Assembly an action plan and propose legislation on how to increase interest in teaching in Vermont elementary and secondary schools, and shall take into account the following: current teaching conditions in Vermont elementary and secondary schools and associated concerns, current licensure and endorsement requirements for Vermont teachers and associated concerns, best practices in enabling and empowering teachers and increasing their levels of engagement, Vermont teachers' mental and physical health resulting from the school environment, Vermont teachers' salary and benefits compared with other states, and Vermont teachers' work-life balance. The committee would be required to submit a report to both the House and Senate Committees on Education on or before December 15th, 2022, that's this year. Within that report, it shall include its action plan and proposed legislation. the committee shall meet to discuss all of these issues to come up with the report. The Secretary of Education shall call the first meeting of the study committee to occur on or before July 15th, 2022. The study committee shall elect a co-chair from among its members at the first meeting. A majority of the membership shall constitute a quorum. The study committee shall not meet more than 8 times. And then finally, the study committee shall have the assistance, administrative, technical, and legal assistance of the Agency of Education. And right now, the current effective date is just shall take effect on passage. Anyone have any questions while I have the language up, or would you like me to stop sharing my screen?
It's okay to stop sharing. Thank you. So again, just to put something on the table to start to think about this, I do think it's this legislative session's responsibility to start to really take this particularly seriously. I mean, we know that things are happening on the ground. We know people are taking it seriously in general. This might not, we might say that this doesn't need to be finished until 2023. We also know that everything going on is highlighting what are particular challenges for teachers. So again, we'll have additional testimony. We'll hear from individuals. We'll see if we're asking the right questions, but I'm just wondering if anybody right now has any immediate sort of questions or comments or concerns, or feels we should not work on this kind of thing this year. Senator Hooker.
I'm thinking of the discussion we had this morning in health and welfare about the immediacy of certain things, like with Act 6, to get things going immediately, as opposed to the longer term effects. And I see this as something of a long-term goal to, create this environment that would draw teachers, draw people into the profession. I guess my concern is that, what are we going to do in the immediate term, the near term, to help keep teachers?
Great point.
That we have, and to get others to stay or, get into the profession from the pool
Really
of people that we have. But I think it's a good idea.
No, I think, but I think what you're saying is really important, and it's great. And I think it should really be front and center. I mean, we can do kind of both of these things, but as we're looking to the future, I think you're spot on that we need to be asking, are there things that we can be and should be doing right now, whether it's bonuses, it's, looking at the days that we're looking at, we're going to talk a little bit about after this, other things that we as the legislature can do to really keep teachers in this role. And I thank you for it, because I think we wouldn't want to miss that opportunity. Senator Lyons.
Thank you. I mean, this is something that absolutely has to happen. I agree with Senator Hooker. There are short-term needs and longer-term needs, and putting incentives in place will be something we should also work on with appropriations and others. But as I look at this, it occurs to me that a couple things. One, and I don't know whether you want this kind of feedback right now or not, but I think it's a great thing to do. What are the impediments that teachers have faced? And so there aren't any teachers in the group, really. We've got executive directors all over the place. Mm-hmm. And so there are also then the concerns might be related to the demands of a curriculum and what they had to study when they were in higher ed. So what allowed for them to become teachers, and are there people out there who dropped out because they had to have a double major that was extremely demanding? I don't know the answer to that, but I think we need to get at how higher ed selects for and supports the best and the brightest to go into teaching. And so I just thinking, maybe there's a higher ed piece to put in there. Maybe there are some teachers to throw in there, that kind of thing. I've had a lot of conversations about this stuff in the past, and I'm trying to think about how best to identify people who can provide insight. That's all.
No, that's really helpful. Center lines in general right now, as it relates, Senator Hooker mentioned some of the discussions that you're having in your morning committee around, keeping people, are these decisions generally hospital by hospital? In other words, hey, such a hospital is going to say, we're going to do a signing bonus, or are these some statewide things that are happening?
It's a combination. So,
Okay.
During COVID, we've put in some regulatory flexibility, licensure flexibility. Those are the kinds of things that you can do pretty quickly.
Yep.
And so licensure flexibility, do a pilot program for teachers and see what the benefit is. So measuring the outcomes. And then, so we've also, obviously hospitals are doing their own thing in terms of, it's not just hospitals, it's clinics and everybody else giving upfront bonuses, incentives, hiring bonuses, changes in work schedule. I mean, all of those things go to keep people happy. And it would be interesting to know what teachers' thoughts are about the demands of their day. There, and then what would make life easier? That's a tough one too, but anyway. So yeah, no, it's not hospital by hospital necessarily, though hospitals have their own ways of keeping people on board. But we also have the compound fracture of travelers that increases the cost dramatically. That's not part of the education system at this point.
I do think it should be on the table. I think if we should have a conversation with the Probes. There are roughly 85,000 students in the state. I'm not sure the actual number of all school personnel, and but it would be yeah, I mean, to give folks a bit of a bonus at the end, to let them know, something. I don't know how people would feel about it or where that would land, but let's say we're talking about 100,000 people and it's $500 or $1,000. I don't even know. It does seem like we should at least put it on the table. Senator Chinden.
So as somebody that spent many a Sunday afternoon building bookshelves, moving fish tanks, and doing other work inside of a public classroom, I think we should recognize the spouses and loved ones of these teachers as well with some sort of thank you or appreciation.
Well, I've got a bill for that. Going to come up at 3:30. You probably shouldn't be in the room, but no. But you even mentioning that just reminds me that so much of the teaching career and is on Saturdays and Sundays and summer and setting up that classroom. And we still, as a country, have a ways to go to get this profession where it really needs to be with salary and support, etc. Yeah, Senator Chin.
Maybe more seriously, I'll say this: whenever I do taxes every year, the federal benefit for teachers is $250 for public school teachers. That's been the same for the last 15, 20 years. I know money doesn't grow on trees, but I could see the amount my lovely spouse spends on her classroom that doesn't get reimbursed for. It amounts to a lot more than $250 a year. So if Vermont wanted to look at some sort of tax benefit to adjust for all of the valid expenses many teachers spend on the weekends with additional materials, just because they don't go through the process otherwise, I think that'd be interesting to pursue. But that's what this group could study.
Yeah, I think I see Beth jotting that down. The other thing that to me is when you talk about somebody who is, you have 5 different class periods, preps, etc. I've always felt if there's very little opportunity, I think, for collaboration. We don't give people the time, the space, the breathing room during the day. Senator Hooker, you know this also from personal experience. It's hard. So where does that collaboration fit in when you're there first thing in the morning and you're leaving, and then you're going home with piles of papers and grading and all of that? So how can we give people the space? How can we give people the time off to continue their education? What does a statewide sabbatical look like if we were to grant, several hundred sabbaticals, a year? What would that, or whatever number, so that people could spend time, no matter really what they do, it's going to be exciting to bring it back in the classroom, whether it's some kind of research or travel/research, teaching somewhere else, perhaps in another country or another state or even another town, going and observing and being mentored by a principal or a superintendent, to kind of enhance that flow in career development. I think there are all sorts of possibilities, and I think we really can and will think outside the box, so that we will end up more and more being the spot where teachers want to be and should be. Senator Hooker, did you want to add anything?
I'm just thinking of, things that we could do. And one of the things I think of is childcare for
Yep.
people who are getting into the profession. I know that Rutland High had, an early childhood program, and I know that some of the teachers took advantage of that when their children were of that age, so that they could be at the school, at the same school that mom was or dad was at. So
Yeah. Absolutely. Senator
So
Lyon.
what I'm thinking is that while we're talking and while you're talking, I mean, we're asking for some creativity in moving forward and making change. And both the short term and the long term are being laid out. So why don't we put 2 bills together? Why don't we just sit around the table as we are, and then make some suggestions and let them fall into one side or the other, and then I think otherwise it's hard for us I think it's hard for us to separate out our short term and our long term. They keep falling in together, but I think by doing that, we might see some benefit.
I think that's a great point. I also think you had a really good point earlier when you said, this as it's written, this is a bunch of executive directors, and really what we want are 5 to 10 teachers to come back to us, in a way, and tell us what's going to keep you, what is going to excite you, what is going to, what do you think your future colleagues would want? So I think that was a really great point. So
And
Beth,
there are teachers who are retired or who
Yeah.
have been around for a long period of time and highly successful.
Yes.
So let's look and see what they do and what they say. Then we have all the other possibilities of paying people's loans so they can, if they stay in Vermont, all that stuff.
Yeah.
That's more, for me, that's more the short term.
Mhm.
mhm.
All right. So yeah, I think it's a great point. Divide them up, 2 different bills. We'll have some additional time and testimony, and I'll ask, actually, I'll probably ask Daphne to reach out to Jeff Fannin and have, listen, this isn't the time to be asking other things. I understand teachers, but are there groups, as Senator Lyons mentioned, perhaps retired teachers, people who recently retired, that would like to be a part of this conversation and come back to us with ideas? That'd be great.
And I wouldn't eliminate the notion of some students going through the process now or recently.
Yeah, the higher ed piece. Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit of a higher ed piece there. there are some pretty stringent requirements out there for people to get through any educational program. And so it could be early ed, it could be, if you're going to become a science teacher, you've got to have a tremendous, you have to have a double major. What's happening now? Are those barriers still existent?
Yeah.
I guess they're not barriers. They're making people really smart and good, but
Right.
I think, didn't we have a discussion about, what it entails to go through, what this curriculum for teacher prep is like? And the question of, some of the courses may or may not be necessary. And so we should maybe look at that as well and see how we can reconfigure what has to be done in order to get a teaching certificate.
Yeah, I suspect a lot of that lands in a combination of government ops and AOE, the licensure piece, but certainly for us to do some research without a doubt, and to come up or to direct some research and come up with a report after having looked at it, be a great thing to include, Beth. You can capture that. Great. Okay. Anything else? Again, just an initial walkthrough. We'll continue on this a little bit next week and going from there. Senator Lyons, did you have a? Okay. Okay, great. Beth, anything from us? Okay. Thank you. So committee, we have some time for some discussion around what we've heard now from Dr. Lee, Dr. Levine, and Secretary French. We've heard a little bit also from people on the ground. I know we've touched on this a bit, but I also recognize people are receiving some emails and probably some other correspondence. So I do want us to just, for those watching, I'll let people know that Secretary French is coming in sometime after Tuesday. Well, I think it's being scheduled for Wednesday, a joint hearing with House Education on the guidance document that will be rolled out by then. That'll happen on Wednesday afternoon. So I don't want to speak for the agency or Dr. Levine, but it sounds like this is probably a document that is still evolving and still being put together. So I don't want to get too ahead of that information coming out, but I also want to know if there are things that individual senators would like us to consider thinking about even now, even before that comes out, as it relates to everything that we've heard. So yeah, Senator Pershing.
Well, yeah, we all know that teachers are under just incredible stress and pressure. So I'm trying to think of how we can help deal with that. And some are saying that flexibility in the schedule is going to help with that. I think there are problems with that, to do it statewide. And it seems like Secretary of Education might do it. He at least he said he would look at each case, and if there is a good reason for them to close the schools, then they would. Sorry. So that's, I guess I'm just thinking out loud about how we would support the teachers, but also just understanding the complications of doing something right now, still early in the school year, while things are still in play.
Senator Chinna.
Yeah, so I'm of a similar mind, and I think you made a good point yesterday. We really need to let the agency come up with their guidance, and then maybe we need to react to it. But as just one person that's been paying attention to these discussions and looking at where we are with schools having to go remote, I hope the administration does lower the minimum days to something that will just give everybody some breathing room. Otherwise, you're going to have teachers that are already overtaxed. looking at extending further into their summer. And that also has budgetary impacts, that has vacation planning impacts. I think where we are in this pandemic, I hope Secretary French and the administration is looking at just lowering that 175 like we did the last 2 years, just to give everybody a little more space.
I don't know if we did it the last 2 years. I could be wrong. I know we did it in 2020, but I don't know if we did it in 2021. And I just say that just in terms of as we're talking. I think 2021 we may have relied heavily on the waiver process, but I'm not sure.
Well,
we did.
and we've heard that the waiver process is going to be used liberally, but
Right.
you know, having said that, it's nice to have a goal that isn't quite so stressful. And last year, let's face it, 2020 and 2021 were less stressful than 2022. The longer we're in this, the greater the stress, and certainly teachers are feeling the brunt of it, and parents are too. So I think something has to give. I will be interested to see what comes out with the guidance information, but you just can't keep demanding perfection in a time when people are incapable of, you know, not people, but schools are incapable of providing sufficient resources and staff. So it's so anyway, they're my thoughts.
I appreciate that. And I wonder a little bit back to what Senator Chittenden said around hoping Secretary French will consider this. To me, so first of all, we could always officially request that. We could have a letter sent that we could ask Jim Demaray to author on our behalf. We could take a look at that, could have some testimony. Ideally, at least where I'm sitting, I feel that having the administration do it is more efficient and makes more sense than 2 weeks of the legislative session, you know, between the House and the Senate, committee of conference, then a gubernatorial veto. But I'm not sure it's the best use of our time. But what Senator Chittenden said is, you know, again, I'm hoping Secretary French will consider that. And that's just another thing that we might do, is consider a letter. Senator Hooker?
Yeah, I'm thinking of a couple of things. First, you mentioned, Senator Campion, about giving teachers time to kind of decompress, maybe would be a word. And certainly if the school year is extended into late June, July 1st, that doesn't give teachers much time to regroup during the summer. Also, that to Senator Perchlick's comment about it's early in the school year, my grandson had his midterm algebra exam or mid-year algebra exam. It isn't early in the school year, and I think the sooner we come up with some guidance, and the department comes up with guidance for teachers and school administrators and lets them know what's happening, the better we're going to be.
No, I think that's true. One thing I think, one of the things, and this comes from a mind wiser than mine, somebody mentioned to me earlier today that one of the things that is going to be helpful is the availability of these rapid antigen tests. And I don't know where that is with the supply chain, but if that can be loosened up, you know, where not only this is happening at schools, but all of a sudden, if a child or a teacher needs to be tested, that you have these at the schools as well, seems to give people even greater sense of, I would think, security. So somebody arrives at school, tested at home, but it's running a fever at midday, could do an antigen test. If that, again, I think part of that is loosening up the supply chain. And I don't know if health and welfare, I don't know if you've heard anything on that or any updates on that. No, you're muted, Senator.
Muted. We can ask tomorrow. Commissioner is coming in, and I'll just raise the question with him about the availability of rapid tests. And
That'd be great.
Senator Hooker's going to remind me.
Okay, and then we'll remind you, Daphne will put it on the agenda for tomorrow.
Okay.
So that'll remind.
I should let you know
Yeah.
that our committee is reviewing a proposal for a statewide mask mandate tomorrow in our committee. We've been working on that. I didn't know whether you knew that or not.
Thanks for the updates. Senator Perslick.
Thank you. Yeah, point well taken, Senator Hooker. Yeah, it's not early in the year. I was thinking of like the time that we.
Excuse me. Slap down there, Senator Chinden. Not early in the year. We'll let you rebuttal. We'll wait for your rebuttal in just a moment.
And the other thing that I thought is important when we're talking about this, yeah, I think it was Dr. Lee had mentioned that we shouldn't lose sight of the students. Like we do, making the school year shorter is going to help with the stress of, I think, most of the teachers. But I think there is some clear evidence that it could hurt some students because being in the school is the best for them, even under the stressful situation. So, and I think that's what Secretary French was saying, thinking about wanting to make sure that there isn't a blanket solution for all, because it could be, it could have adverse impacts that we're not thinking of. So that's the one thing that gives me some pause about us trying to do it. And I agree with Senator Campion that having the time that we take is going to take a while. It would be great if the state could do it, because then it would be known going forward with that flexibility. Because I think right now superintendents might say like, oh, it would be good if we could take a day here or there, but we don't know what the impact is. And the later we go in the school year, even though we're not early in the school year, it's going to be more difficult.
Yeah, Senator Hooker.
With regard to that, it seems as if
with regard to where we are in the school year, are we?
Wherever, no, I know
We are. Okay.
It's a question
Vermont
of
did get that. It's January. It's okay.
The fact that the secretary and Dr. Lee are certainly cognizant of the need for kids to be in school, and especially some kids.
Yeah.
I wonder if we could get a handle on what the summer programs are going to be like.
Yeah.
Because that would be, a smooth transition into summer programs would really help to ameliorate the concern about kids who need to be in that environment.
Yeah, I think you're right. Transitioning from the school year right into summer programs where, again, it's structured, there are academic opportunities, those social emotional pieces that are as we've heard, just the foundation for learning is so important. Senator Chinden, please.
I heard a couple of comments where we really said teachers, and I think we all mean everybody that works in schools, because I will say with my lovely spouse, they're pulling from every corner to cover what's being done. So we're really trying to give everybody in our schools some flexibility and a break. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I think people who are the admin assistant in the principal's office, honestly, that's a lot of interaction with students, parents, everyone, really the front lines. Okay, so I know everyone is going to be receiving this question from colleagues, Democrats, Republicans, progressives, and so we'll just continue and from constituents. I think what I'm hearing right now is it sounds like waiting for the guidance, it makes the most sense. And certainly if anyone would like to encourage Secretary of Education to move in a certain direction, if we have the majority of this committee to sign a letter, I'm certainly willing to have Jim DeMarais draft something. There's also, of course, if people want to individually write to Secretary French indicating having heard from constituents, that's also an option. I do think it sounds like we have a some consensus around it. It could take some serious testimony and some serious time if we were to indeed jump into this, and what the outcome would be if it made it to the governor's desk. So let's just continue to talk. Yeah, Senator Shindon.
So I want to sort of separate this conversation, but it is entwined. I do think this committee, maybe this year, maybe next year, should take up some conversation about what a remote day looks like. I feel like that's going to persist with us even after this pandemic, to give flexibility, if some parameters around when a day. We get snowstorms in Vermont, and there's other circumstances, boilers break, and maybe school districts are going to want to have a remote day count as a day. So that might be something we could put on the back burner, but otherwise think about how to define.
And that might be if, for example, if we come out of this sooner rather than later, and it is a summer that's a little bit normal, the agency may have the bandwidth to take that on and come back to us with some answers on what they believe the definition is, and something for us to respond to. I think it's a really good point. Senator Shindon, you are going to be away tomorrow for a little bit. What time are you not going to? Because we are, I think, going to try to do some kind of thank you to folks. So
2 to 3:30, I have a family obligation, but
great. So we'll try to do it. We'll try to do it early on. Great. Anything else at this point? Okay. Have a good afternoon. Thank you.